so much for joining us. And you're our first, I would say, like virtual conversation. We always like to ask our guests, what is your name? What do you do? And just kind of introduce yourself.
Sure. My name's Tarun Sridharan. I guess I'm like a bit of a hybrid attorney marketer person. I got into the marketing world when I went abroad and had to go remote to try and like in order to live abroad, I kind of had to go remote. And so I started going freelance. And even though I was trained as an attorney, I looked into like other kind of like niches that I could fit into that were actually remote at the time. I mean, now it's actually possible to be an attorney remotely, I think. Like there's actually firms which would probably allow it, but back then it was pretty much impossible. So I already had to like get into something else back then. So now like I'm in that hybrid role, and I guess a lot of people know me through Odd Compass, which is my YouTube channel. That's just sort of like I guess a side hustle, but it's kind of grown past that now. So just trying to figure out where to take my career right now and whether to focus more on Odd Compass. So in kind of like a interesting transition moment in my life right now.
Thank you so much, Tarun. And I was just gonna say, I forgot to introduce the the theme of our show, which is about self-love and self-evolution. And I feel that what really amazed me about meeting you was like, I know we met in my old job, but like when I spoke with you, like you were so like humble and so inviting, just even though it's virtual, even though I'm not like right next to you on your desk. And I think like what also wowed me was like all the different things that you embark on. And when you shared with me how like you also am traveling, how have you kind of, I think it's just something that I see with my friends when I'm speaking with some of them, is like speaking about kind of moving in other people's time. When you create something like Odd Compass, or like your own passion, you have to be in your own driver's seat. And so how have you navigated like going and embarking on attorney or embarking on legal services, and then also practicing your own driver's seat? Because I think it's interesting in that, especially when I speak to a lot of my friend circles, we're not really taught to embrace and let alone practice your own driver's seat, which is your passion, your interest. We're always told no, no, no. And so, right. So how did you just like come up with this passion of yours and just follow through, like have discipline,
Yeah, it's funny. Okay, that's such a good question. And I think the answer is a little bit surprising too. So I guess I'll sort of get into it. It's funny that you mentioned that, like, a lot of people tell me that I'm really disciplined, but I'm sure if you ask my family, they wouldn't necessarily agree. I think what I am is focused. And I think where that comes from, if I really had to like boil it down, I don't think I take much credit for it. I think I was put into pretty unique circumstances in my life. And that has equipped me with a strange sort of appreciation for unorthodox pathways in life. And so just to kind of clarify, since I don't want to be too vague with people, I grew up with an interesting kind of split life where, like other Asian Americans, I actually had a lot of family back in our home country, which is India. And they're all very well-to-do and very successful people. And so I was exposed to like very wealthy and influential people in India. Um, and that was my family and their community and stuff like that back home. And um, but the unique thing was that my family in the U.S. was quite unorthodox by virtue compared to like most other professional Asian American standards, which is that my mom was divorced like when I was just a baby, and you struggled with money and all sorts of stuff, and it's something that a lot of other people that I've met who are like Indian American can't really relate to. Um, but here's the twist. It's like because I've met a lot of other people who grew up poor in America, but they are still driven by that drive to make money. But where it was unique for me was I had a really good childhood despite being poor. And I was also exposed to very miserable people who were wealthy and powerful. So that combination made me, it just like built in me this natural rejection of wealth, power, and influence as inherently good, or something that should be driving you, because I myself experienced happiness being poor and growing up and having a good family, like good close ties to my brother and my mom, like good friends, and just a happy life, yet being very, very poor. And obviously, I met people who were just absolutely miserable with more wealth and power than any like high end professional could even dream of. You know what I mean? I often refer to, I guess this is a little bit cool, but I often refer to like people who focus too much on their career with the focus on making money and not following their passion as like somewhat misguided, in that they are making money just to simply be like comfortable peasants. Like they never make it out of like they never make transformative wealth that they can actually do good in the world with potentially. And I think that is like the criteria for me for willingness to submit to something. Like I would be willing to submit to the degree that you're talking about, like to someone else's uh, expectations or someone else's like force of will, if it would do good for people in a legitimate way, or if it could be transformative. But because I'm not in a position to be like that, of course I'm going to chart my own path. I hope that makes sense. I know that was a little bit of a rant, but
No, thank you so much for sharing. No, I feel like I could relate to so many things that you were shared with me, where the beauty of America, even though there's a lot of different questionable patches, is that you see so many different perspectives. And I can really relate to what you're sharing with me, is that I came to America when I was 9 years old. And so there are a lot of things I saw, like what you shared, where it showed me it's not so black and white.
mhm.
And on top of that, it's so crazy because I was speaking with my friend a few days ago that it's still so hard for me to swallow. Is that good things don't happen to good people and bad things don't happen to bad people.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
it's kind of like, you think in an ideal world, you have a good heart, you try your best, you're kind, and that should be the exterior representation of how you're presented in this world. But like what you mentioned, it's that everything external, there's no like linear equation to the inside.
Right.
um and I think another thing that was so profound that you mentioned was transformative wealth, because I feel like it's a trap, like you mentioned, at times, to be fixated on what success should be. When in reality, you could be XYZ and be prolific and be wealthy. It's like, how can you tell someone that they're not wealthy in their life? And I feel that, that's what I really appreciated about your journey, is that I genuinely really admire people who are uniquely themselves. And I think more and more at times, due to the hyper sensitivity everywhere we go, we're kind of forced to have these opinions, and we're forced to have these imageries of what life should be, but the media never ask you, what's your opinion? The media never ask you, what's your ideal life? And so thank you so much for sharing, because I resonated with a lot of the things that you mentioned.
No problem. Yeah. And some of what you just said is really, really interesting in terms of yeah, I don't think it's just the media. I think it's like our families, our communities also don't really ask us those questions, because it isn't really to anyone's benefit except ourselves for us to explore who we are and our passions. And I think like our society's become so transactional, or maybe it's always been that way, but it can be transactional. And if you don't carve out a space for yourself, then nobody else is going to do it for you. And I think that is often what holds people back, because a lot of times I think people want something people want easy. They want something that's been provided for them. And I'm not even blaming them for wanting easy. I mean, life is hard. So it makes sense why we kind of have aspects of ourselves that we don't cultivate if it's too difficult, because sometimes we're just trying to get through the day. And so I can't even blame people for that, but it's just a reality that there are certain things in life that will lead to true satisfaction and happiness, but it really requires you to like push against these stagnant forces in your life,
Yeah.
and it's been something that that's been something I've been thinking about a lot recently, because I'm in my mid 30s now. I'm 35, and a lot of people that I know at this point, they were really, really interesting, enlivened, passionate people in their early 20s, mid 20s, and life kind of forced them down a particular path where I've had conversations with them now, and they're not exactly like super happy with the path that they were forced down. I don't want to say that they're unhappy, but there's like, for them, they've definitely admitted that something's missing in their life, because they kind of avoided answering these really hard questions. So like, I don't know how you feel about this. I'm kind of curious, but I think the emotional work of investigating who you are really, and then making that leap and being like, okay, I'm going to like cultivate my authentic self, um, even if I face challenges for this, that is more difficult than working like a 90-hour week at a law firm. Like, I actually think the emotional work is somehow something people would rather avoid more than even like the hard work of just, busting your ass at a law firm. Sorry for the cursing.
No, I can relate to what you're sharing in so many ways. And I'm taking notes as we're speaking. So
Sure.
little gems that I remember of, which is like, one, I was just speaking with my mom earlier today that we're not really taught what is having awareness, what is emotional work. And so
Mhm.
I think at times, like, I see, like, when people are dating, for example, they're so easy to say, like, oh, this person was very transactional, or this person was very XYZ. But then what I like to say is what they did is not the ideal way to go about the world. But
Right.
are any of us taught what is a correct way to have emotional vulnerability and emotional work? And another thing I want to, like, I also 100% resonate with you is what you mentioned about the difficulty doing the emotional work. Because I think at times our society has put down having feelings. It's like, especially when you're in the business world at times, we're taught
Right.
to have more of the left brain. We're taught to be more emotionless, where I like to differ and think that it's about balance and emotions, and letting your feelings flow and being in the present is just as important. And I agree with you that in a way we can't really like it's understandable because the moment you start tapping into your vulnerability, it's like everything you ever thought is crashing down. You know, what is right or wrong? What did I do? It's like I realized when I started doing, like, for me, because I it's like I noticed that once I started looking within, it's sensory overload, like you mentioned.
Right.
And it's like it's not a time off where it's like you mentioned, if you were to work 80, 90 hours, you can go about your day. But then
Right.
but then like when you start tapping in, it's like, oh, I remember this, I remember this, I remember this, I remember this, I remember this. And how does this relate to this? It's like an endless spider web.
Yeah, yeah. Your brain never really turns off when
Yeah.
it comes to examining who you are, right? Yeah, that's so true. It's
Yeah.
tough with like in the corporate world. I think it's particularly difficult to uh, what you said, the free flow of emotions and just kind of being flexible in that regard. I think that's it's hard to get buy-in there because there's a lot of people who are just not built that way. You know, to like they can't respect that stuff. That it's just not who they are. They're very analytical. They're very something about them just is it naturally doesn't lean into that. And they tend to be people who eventually get like management positions and leadership positions in the corporate environment. And I think like that sets the tone. You know what I mean? I don't know if it's ever really an intentional thing. I think it's just not who they are, right? Like it's kind of, I had a lot of engineering friends in college, and I love them to death, but they're a very particular sort of people, right? Like you know, you can have they're a lot of fun, but there's particular conversations like you're not going to have with a lot of them, right? Or there's certain trends that you notice with a lot of engineers where many of them tend to be a little bit arrogant about like their knowledge in certain areas that they're not even necessarily familiar with, but because they're really smart in one thing, like they tend to believe it applies to a lot of other things. So yeah, there's like all these quirks with people's personalities in general that I think it defines that industry or that company environment, but it's not like even intentional. It's not like their desire to make it that way just becomes that way because everyone around them is like that too, you know? That's why I feel like it's kind of a curse to be a creative because, you know, you are like, I mean, it's inherent to it that you're going to think a little bit differently, that you're going to, and hopefully express authentic emotion to the degree possible. But then you're often put in environments where it's just like other people are not going to get you because the essential quality of being creative is that it's a rare quality, right? So it's like you are cursed to be, you know, lonely a little bit in like certain environments.
No, that is so like I see what you mean, which is like we all have different ways of navigating. And in a way, it's like our universe or our society right now is advocating for a particular cluster. And so like the clusters that are like, woo, you know, like rainbow, it's hard at times. And so I guess, you know, my question for you is like, what would be your advice for, I feel like, especially in 2023, I don't know, Tarun, it's
Huh.
like the appreciation for the arts. It's like I have a lot of thoughts because it's like on one hand, I really appreciate that art is seen as accessible. Art is seen as something you can do. Because my problem in the past was like how in the past it was like you go to a museum and that's art.
Right.
You buy expensive paints and you have the resource to get expensive, you know, make expensive canvas, and now you're a painter. I do like that art is accessible and
Mhm.
art is encouraged. On the other hand, I feel that with generative AI and all
Yeah.
these different things. And like what you mentioned about how in certain work environments, there's efficiency deadlines that is disruptive to the natural flow of the arts. Like, how do you maintain composure in those instances?
Oh yeah, wow. Okay, so I'll try and answer like one side of things. Obviously, it's just an opinion, but I think generative AI is, I don't mean to be like cynical, but I kind of think all creative people, I mean, in general, people who derive value from their productivity are going to feel they need to create new purpose, because, and this is going to be like such a sea change, because I've really thought about this, like just the ability even of some of these large language models to produce stories. So before Odd Compass, I used to write novels. I was writing novels for like 7, 8+ years, and trying to publish. And now, I mean, I'm so glad I got into video making, because it's like a little bit more complex, and it probably won't, get interfered with yet to the same degree. But like the stories I've seen these LLMs, large language models, yeah, these like large language models able to create, it's just scaring me. Like I think in a year, because they're moving so fast, I think in a year we're gonna start to get like almost indistinguishable like short stories maybe, or something like that. Like where you can say, and the fascinating thing is you can like feed it a piece of content and then be like, do this in the style of Bukowski or something like that, and it will do that. I mean, it won't be perfect, but um, it will probably be better than the majority of writers who can do that kind of thing, right? And so, and this is just where we are at right now. There was like a famous researcher in the 1970s, sort of like the godfather of computer science, and I remember this quote from him, and they asked him, "Does God exist?" And his reply was, "Not yet." And the implication was that like AI will eventually reach some sort of super intelligence where it will be able to gather and self-perpetuate to such a degree that it can become godlike. I mean, legitimately. And I've thought about like what it means for our own creative capacities. Like it'll be so hard for me myself to like feel purposeful in the world if anything I could create, I mean, it's not going to be now necessarily, but let's even say 5, 10, 20 years from now, when AI gets good enough, because it's just a matter of time, right? And when it gets good enough to produce films, like novels, like anything just as good as a human being, and but like instantly, then it really calls into question all of our values, right? As creatives. Like, I don't know what that means for us, what our place is in society when something else can do what we consider to be almost like essentially soul oriented work, but like it's, you know, that scares me. I think it's probably a broader conversation that we can have on this. It's something that I think about a lot, because I have a lot of friends who are like visual artists, and their situations are being disrupted right now. Like as we speak, there's people who would commission their art who are just not doing it anymore. Like their actual livelihoods are being affected, and have been affected for even just the last 3, 4, or 5 months. Like, and it's only going to get worse for them. So, um, I don't know, that has me thinking a lot about like a post scarcity society where like all our needs are met, and we don't even need to work for it. Like, where do we find purpose if it's not creation? If it's not production, is it curation? Like, is it just, are we gonna like have people who are creative? They're gonna be like, no, 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 I can get you the best AI result. Like that's gonna be what we boil down to. I don't know, but
Well, that's so fascinating to me because there's so many aspects of art, like you mentioned. We we attach our sense of self to it more
right.
personally than a technical work at times. And especially what you mentioned about the progress of making art, I feel like it's largely getting ignored at times.
Mhm.
even now, you know, like when I'm thinking about photography, I remember, you know, when I was in high school, film photography was appreciated. Um,
Mhm.
but now, even with photography, it's just there's such a blurred line between professional photography and consumers taking pictures on their camera. And kind of like what you shared about generative AI, what is going to be our footprint moving forward? Is it going to be the curation of writings? Like it's just so bizarre, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's moving so much faster than we think. I have some friends in the AI space who they're well past worrying about what's going to happen to people's jobs. Their concern is with what's referred to as the alignment problem, which is of they their belief is that within 5 years there's going to be like super intelligent AI, which is the whole godlike AI kind of thing. And the issue is when you've created a god, how do you make sure that the god is on your side? So it's like their concerns are
That
like
is crazy.
exist. Yeah,
Because
their
we
concerns
already
are
know
like
what's gonna happen.
existential. Yeah, like we're talking about like creativity and
Yeah,
purpose,
yeah,
and
yeah.
they're like, oh, how do we save the world from what we've just created? Like, I mean, not yet, but like, and they're looking like down the line, right? Like 5, 10
Yeah.
years down the line, they're really concerned about like if you create an all powerful AI, like first of
Yeah.
all, it will lie to you. Like it's not going to be honest with you about its intentions and stuff like that because they've already discovered like if you tell it to act like it has its own motivations, it will like screen and lie to you about what it's doing, and it will actually
Really?
like yeah, oh, it's like super manipulative, and it will and the thing is like obviously like nuclear codes and all that stuff is like protected and they're not like on the same sort of networks, but I think about that a lot. Like I mean there's a lot of computer systems that are attached to like just weapons in general and militaries and stuff like that. Like if you think about it, I mean it is an enormously scary problem. But sorry, I know this isn't like an AI conversation, so I shouldn't go
No,
too
no,
much
no,
down
no, no,
that
no,
path,
no. You're
but
totally fine. I mean, I think the thing is like knowing this, knowing that supercomputer hyper intelligence is coming, like at like right now, May 12th, 2020,
yeah,
like I see content about strikes, you know,
yeah.
because of, you know, and so what is your message? Like if you could give an advice to the creatives, if you can, like what would be like what would you say? And maybe it's blunt, maybe I don't know.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Oh my God. I've always been someone who's like, I don't know, like something that really resonates with me always is to inspire other people to the degree that I can. And I don't know whether I'm an inspiring person or not, but just that encouraging people, I suppose, is how I would say. And so I never really want to take a negative point of view in this stuff because I think it's better to be motivated than to not be. It's better to be motivated and fail than to never start at all. Um, Without going into too much details, like I was out just at dinner earlier with a new friend that I made recently, who's kind of like an entrepreneur, and he's in a bit of a transition phase in his life as well, but is trying to do like a podcast and was looking for ideas, but kind of was struggling with getting started on the stuff, and that kind of perfectionist tendency to not be sure about things and to kind of always hold back. And so we've been having these conversations recently and trying to encourage him and stuff like that, just because I think it's more important to get started than to be perfect. But so when you ask that question to me, like, what sort of advice would I give to creatives? I got to be really careful because like a part of me is like, I don't know. I feel like everyone in society is going to be dealing with their own, so sort of the collapse of their own purpose and a discovery of some new purpose. And I don't know if creatives are, I really don't think that we're excluded from that. I think we're also going to have to seriously ask ourselves difficult questions about can we find purpose without our creativity? I mean, I don't think that we should assume necessarily that's going to be the case, but I think we should be prepared to have that tough conversation with ourselves.
And it's so
Um,
interesting that you say this because earlier you were sharing with us about how like after a certain age, we there's people that ponder about their life. And
Right.
I literally wrote down on my notebook timelessness, because I personally feel that as I age as a human on this simulation, it's like I keep questioning this linear trajectory. And I
Yeah.
see more and more it's timelessness. Like every day, like you mentioned, what is your purpose? Every day. It's really like there's no linear, like if I do this when I'm this age, it's gonna be this. If I it's I
Yeah.
see more and more.
That's oh god, that's so fun. Everything is a little bit connected in this conversation. It's funny that I
Yeah.
kind of mentioned offhand Bukowski earlier when I was talking about like styles. Bukowski is a perfect example of what you're talking about. He was in the mail, like the sorry, I don't. The name is escaping me, but like whatever the government agency that handles mail is, I don't know why it's escaping me right now. But yeah,
USPS?
yeah. Sorry, yeah. I think yeah, U.S. Postal Service. That's what it is. I don't know why that escaped me for a second, but so he used to work for them and was quite miserable. Like that was actually a part of his personality, was like his whole ranting against his like 9 to 5 life, because he didn't start writing, I believe, until his, or rather, he didn't get published as a writer and like become full time until he was mid to late 50s, I think. I mean, that's such a late start to script. I mean, the good thing about a lot of creativity outside of like things which require you to have like youthful looks, I think the good thing about creativity is you can do it throughout your life. There's definitely stories of people who
Yeah,
are successful painters like later in life, or
definitely.
filmmakers, or what have you. Even acting, like obviously you can't necessarily get like a lead role later on, but you can still get into acting later. I mean, Morgan Freeman, I think his first movie was in his 40s or something like that, right? Um, yeah, so it's like there's definitely opportunities there, and I agree with your like nonlinear point of view, because I think if you get stuck on that, I know a lot of people get stuck on that. They're like, no, 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 I need to do this at this time, and then eventually I'm going to be like this. I know so many people like that, and it's not just about creativity. It's like they think that where they're at in life, they're very unhappy because they don't feel that they're where they should be. But I don't know what where you should be means. And without getting too
That is such
personal,
a
like
motto. Or that is like that's like a tweet, viral tweet, you know?
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I've been forced to think about this stuff a lot. I don't know how personal we're supposed to get on this podcast, but I got divorced like 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago now, 3 years ago now actually, and that was a big shocker to me. It kind of came unexpectedly to me, and it forced me to examine what like where I'm at in my life and what is normal for where I'm at. So like I'm 35, and now like the possibility of having kids and stuff is far on the horizon. Like getting married again, stuff like that. Like there's so much that I'm now delayed on, right? Because I was like in that, it wasn't, I never felt forced or never felt like I was being forced to be traditional or anything like that. But I was on a path that felt very safe because it was linear, And now it's like I've been thrown into this very chaotic ocean. But the thing is that like the surface is always rough, but like in stormy seas or whatever, if you go below the surface, it's peaceful, right? And I think that's something that I have to like remind myself, and I think a lot of people should think about that is, you know, a lot of times things on the surface seem messy because you're only exposed to one side of it. You're not really looking beneath the surface and thinking about like what is essentially you and what you need to value. I think just I've been more grateful recently about my family and their support, my friends being like super supportive and loyal and encouraging, and also just being like healthy in the world, and just having the opportunities to grow and reflect. Because something my friend told me a long time ago, but it's been on my mind recently, is he used to work at customer service and at Apple in Texas. And one of his supervisors who he became friends with was an older lady, and she had a daughter who was like in her mid 20s, and she was in New York City, kind of like going after the grind, excited to be in New York City, hadn't really been in a big city before. And her daughter collapsed and died suddenly of a heart attack at work at 25 or 26. And she was distraught, obviously. And my friend, and other coworkers and stuff were talking to her. And that really made an impact on me. And I thought about that a lot recently because, like nothing, I know the saying that happened, is said a lot, but nothing is promised. And I kind of feel like we don't reflect on that enough, that like we should be grateful that we have this day and hopefully the next, and that's like as far as we need to go. But I just think like we're so stuck in this mentality where we're always like thinking too far ahead about like, oh, where's my life going to be? Am I on the right path? It's like, if you knew you were going to die in a week, would you be thinking about that? Are you on the right path? Maybe you just be trying to live these next 7 days really well. And maybe that's good enough. So I'm always stuck between this thing where it's like, I have these ambitions, but then I'm also like, no, but that's not actually the route to happiness. It's just, it's good to have ambition, but I don't think it is healthy to make that your number one priority at all.
Thank you so much for sharing, and I'm very sorry to hear.
Like, oh yeah.
I don't know why I'm getting kind of emotional, but it's like, I don't know. It's like there's so much beauty with what you shared. Nothing is promised. And
yeah. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, but I'm just thinking like, if that was a painting, like a mural, how would people interpret it? It's like, it's so like blatant, like nothing is promised.
Yeah.
It's so hard.
Yeah, I think that's
beautiful.
I think that's like a biblical saying. I'm not Christian, but I think I heard it from, I think it's a biblical thing. But yeah, there's a lot of like, there's a lot of wisdom like that in so many like world religions. I'm not particularly religious, but I don't know if you know about the Bhagavad Gita, which is like a Hindu spiritual text or whatever. But
I did read it once.
Oh, okay, wow.
Yeah.
That's actually impressive. Yeah, there's one part of it. I mean, there's a lot of really interesting wisdom in it, but there's one part that's always stuck out in my mind. And so, just I guess for the viewers who might not know about this, it's basically a poem within like a larger epic text of India, where the context is there's this war between these two sides, and actually the two sides are friends. Some of them are relatives. It's like a horrible war because it's not just between two completely unfamiliar sides. I mean, these two sides, they grew up together, some of them. And so the main character, his name's Krishna, he's like this warrior. Oh, sorry, not Krishna. It's Arjuna. He's this warrior. And he's on his chariot. And the opening of it is he's between these two armies. And the war is about to start. The battle's about to begin. And his charioteer is a god. He doesn't know it at the time. He just knows that he's a very wise and powerful man who's not necessarily just a charioteer. That's all he really knows at the time. And he breaks down in the middle of before the battle starts, and he gets on his knees and he's like, he puts down his sword and he's like, I can't fight. I can't do this. And Krishna like then goes on a whole lecture about the nature of life and reality and stuff like that in order to encourage him to stand back up and fight. And I think it's such a beautiful, powerful, like philosophical text, because what it like in the end, he's like, there's no past and there's no future. It's only the now, and all you can do is stand up and fight your battles every day. And essentially, like, you are not entitled to the fruits of your labor. You're only entitled to the labor itself. And so like
for me it's so deep. The last
yeah, it's beautiful, but like I think about that every single day when I'm doing creative work. I always think about it because, you know what's funny is my family's now like all excited about the YouTube stuff and all that stuff,
Yeah.
and they get excited about the stats. Like I'll get calls from my mom. She's like, "Oh, I saw that this video hit 1 million views. I saw that this thing did this," and they get like frustrated with me because I don't get excited about it, and but I also don't get sad when things
Yeah.
don't go my way. So
You're
like,
like this.
yeah, and that's changed a lot since I was younger. When I was younger, I always was looking for a win, and that was so unhealthy, and it just led to unhappiness and frustration and stress. And over time, I realized that you just need to like do the work and just trust that things will go as they should. Like that's the only thing you can do.
I don't know. I feel like I know this is a episode recording, but I don't know. Like I'm personally so grounded by what you shared. Don't get fixated on the fruits of your labor. Like it's the labor itself, the beauty of the labor itself.
Yeah. Yeah, it's also something that like I've been really blessed to have like certain people in my life. Like my older brother is kind of like one of those serial entrepreneur types. And one thing I noticed about him is like money literally doesn't mean anything to this man. Like he's the least money motivated person in New York I've ever like he's living in Manhattan and like he couldn't care less. The guy lives like a Spartan in like a box in the lower Manhattan, and like he just goes for walks, and like his whole life is about the excitement of that journey, right? Like helping people with their companies, with their startups, coming up with his own ideas, developing them. And he couldn't like obviously he wants to make money because it means he can employ more people and he can be more of a success, and that's the joy of it. But it's not for the things he can buy with money itself. And I find that fascinating because like that really is that sort of stuff in action. It's like he only does it for the joy of the labor itself, nothing else, you know? And it really inspires me because like I wish I could be like that. And I think there's always like that's always like the ultimate place that you want to be at, right? Where like you're able to fail and not be hurt by it. And you're able to, and even when you succeed, you don't obsess over your success and become arrogant about it. Like that's, you know, because if you are looking for a win and you're like obsessed with the fruits and you get them, it's easy to be arrogant, right? It's easy to be like, no, I deserve this. I'm amazing. I'm like, you know what I mean? Like, and that's dangerous too, because like you don't want to be that kind of person who just becomes arrogant about their success and things like that. So
yeah, and I feel like also it's like, what if it's not what you expected?
Right.
What if the fruit is not like? What if you're looking for a mango and you got a banana? You know?
Oh, that would be horrible. That's a good analogy. Yeah, I get what you're saying. I think that's actually interesting because so I was doing novels for like a really long time, right? And like when with my last novel, it was 2018, and like I believed in it so much, and I was like, oh, I need to win. I need to win. I used to say that. I was like, I really need to win. And I submitted it to this like mentorship program, and I really thought it could get an agent and eventually get published. Like I really believed in that novel. But it wasn't really written to the market at the time. And I got like positive feedback on like people, but they were like, sorry, but we can't represent this and stuff like that. So it really hurt me. But at the time, I switched over to like, I was like, okay, I can't keep doing this. I have to go to a different like medium and see what I can do there. So I went to like animating things on YouTube and all that stuff. But that what you said about like the fruits are going to be different. It's like I think creatives oftentimes get stuck in being like overly specific with who they are and also with their skill set. Like, because a lot of things that people obsess over and they're like, no, I was born to be a filmmaker. It's like, yo, if you were born like 200 years ago, you would never possibly become a filmmaker, right? There wasn't even film around. So like, it's not really about the specific. Yeah, like it's not really about the specific thing. It's about your creative sensibilities and your drive. So I like to think less specifically, and then like you said, it helps you avoid that mango banana problem,
Yeah.
right? Like, because then, because yeah, if you get what you don't want, then maybe you could like banana. Like maybe that's
Yeah.
okay.
Maybe
You know what I
you
mean?
start liking the banana version.
Yeah. Yeah. Like my aunt used to in India, they have these like types of bananas that are like really popular. They're like
Wow.
these native bananas that are really tiny. They're like mini bananas. You can have like three of them, and they're like the equivalent of one regular banana in the US. But like yeah, it's wild. My aunt was like obsessed with them and used to get like these huge bundles of them, and she would just
Yeah.
eat a bunch of them throughout the day. And we would all
Wow.
just look at her like she was crazy because like mango, there's guava, there's all these delicious fruit, and she's just like popping these mini bananas.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, we were like, that's nuts. But maybe she was on some.
Um, no, but like, thank you so much for sharing with me, us, the community, all this, because I feel like, I don't know, I was so wowed by all the profound gems. And I think the biggest thing that I take away from kind of what you shared, which is very crazily in line with what I am working on, is like every day, just make the most of every day. And what you shared about the beauty of the walk. It's like I watched this Japanese director, and in his interview, he mentioned how at times the younger generation is fixated on the mountain peak,
Mhm.
but he was sharing with the interviewer, what about the road? Like observing the grass, observing the flower. And I really thank you for encouraging all of us to just live life, you know? Just
Yeah.
live life, you know? Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean that's something that I think I hope I don't come across like I figured it out. Like
Yeah.
I have to work on these things every day too. You know, it's one of those things I have to remind myself. I have to try and like practice good, I guess, mental health. I don't know what I would define it
Yeah.
as, but yeah, like it's something that I'm also working on. So I don't think it's like any of us ever get it perfectly right, but I do think like having these values and trying to hold to them are kind of useful, I guess. Because especially now where like everything is so transitionary right now, like, you know, what with like the changing work environment now, like everyone's kind of remote, or at least a lot of people are remote. And
Yeah.
you know, we all kind of went through this massive isolation phase, and I think we're like wrestling with that whole thing. I mean, we've all gone through so much that um it feels like so many people that I've talked to are just floating right now and unsure of like what to ground themselves in. And I often notice that people will reject um, grounding themselves if they feel like it's going to make them weaker, right? Like, so for example, the things we've been talking about, you might be surprised, but like there are guys that I talk to, and obviously this is a sad feature of how like masculinity is taught to us, I think. But there's a lot of guys that I talk to who would rather not believe this stuff because it doesn't give them that feeling of a fight. Does that make sense? You know what I mean? Like it's like, wait, you mean that in order for me to grow as a person, I might need to, you know, self-reflect and not be obsessed with like material,
Yeah. It's
securing
like
material
it's such a
wealth.
difference from win-win-win. Acquire,
Yeah,
acquire,
yeah.
acquire, you know?
Yeah, because like the win-win-win thing, I get it though. Like I don't know. I'm sure a lot of people feel this way, but it can feel good sometimes to
Yeah,
fight for something,
definitely.
right?
Right.
Um, and I think that like it really takes a lot of effort. I think people don't talk about this enough, but it takes so much effort to like reprogram yourself so that you are motivated still to fight, but you are not obsessed with winning. I
Yeah.
think that is like the key, right? Like that's really hard for a lot of people because I so often will like I have a friend who I'm not going to name, but like he constantly tells me he doesn't feel like where he's at the right place in his life, and he should have been married a long time ago, and he should have made more money and all this stuff. And I'm just thinking to myself, like, man, you know, you're healthy, you
Yeah.
look good for 40, like, you know, you have a good job, like you the world is at your fingertips, but like he's just so obsessed with the negativity of not being where he should be.
No,
So
I
yeah,
agree.
I don't know. I always feel like that is best avoided. That feeling of did I win or lose, and trying to count your like trying to measure yourself up against other people and where you're at. Because, like we talked about earlier, like you could always have success later in life if that's what you're looking for. So it's not worth stressing out over it.
Yes, and I think another beauty of what the wisdom you shared with us is I also see more and more is like everything is unpredictable. Like my friend was saying how like people are wild cards, but I feel like you overthinking about the future is a wild card.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's unpredictable. So be kind today. Um,
Right.
like do the best you can to be compassionate today. Do the best you can to do the work you wanted to do today, even if it's like half of a page, you
Mm-hmm.
know, because
Yeah.
it's so unpredictable. Like even for me now, I don't know, like maybe I'm too but it's like nowadays I'm like even next week is I don't know. I don't know. You know?
Yeah, yeah. And some people think of that as like, what's so funny is some people think of that as like wishy-washy or
Yeah.
like, oh, you're not structured enough. But it's
Yeah.
like, I don't know. I kind of feel like that's actually the healthiest way of
Yeah.
being.
It's like you made dinner reservation with your friends. It sometimes get deleted. You never know. And
Yeah.
you
Oh
go
yeah.
on and you're still happy, you know?
Flakiness. Yeah, you got to
Yeah,
account for
yeah.
that. Um,
Well, I see where like, we have only a few minutes left and like Tarun, like this was so fun. And I feel like the
yeah.
time was like this. If there's time. um, but okay, I have one question. We always ask
Sure.
this kind of questions to our guests, which is we usually like to ask like I know we talked about timelessness, but it is fixated on time. And I thought I would like to ask you maybe if you do believe in reincarnation and let's say like 200 years later or 100 years later, speaking about souls, because we were talking about souls,
Right. Right.
if you meet that person who reincarnated from your soul, what question would you ask them?
Whoa, what a cool question. Okay. Oh, that's so interesting. Okay, well, first off, um, I'm going to give a bit of a boring answer. I don't know, I guess, but
Yeah.
I adore reincarnation as a concept. I guess part of that is my bias due to being Indian, but I've written like my recent novels were about reincarnation. Like it's like reincarnation adventures kind of or mysteries or that sort of
Oh,
thing.
wow.
So I am kind of like married to the concept. Like I consider it a really fascinating uh idea. Um what would I ask that person or what would I tell
Yeah.
them?
Like when you see
Uh,
them, maybe you could hug them or I don't know, like what would you do?
yeah, wow, that's so fascinating. Okay, like I don't know what I would do. I guess I would just love to see. Well, they wouldn't even be a descendant; it would be like me, right?
Yeah,
Like technically,
it would be
yeah.
you.
I guess hug them and just be like, "Hey, what's up? Like, how am I doing now?" but the thing that really fascinates me, and I think this is kind of
Yeah,
like linked to this, is
yeah,
I've always thought if you were like if you were in love with someone and then you died tragically and then you're reincarnated and you like later had a vision of whatever it was, right? And you go
yeah,
back to like your home country wherever you were and you try and meet that person,
yeah,
they would have moved on and they would have been like they maybe be in their 50s when you're in your 20s or 30s and like you go and they're married, they have kids, and maybe you were like really in love with them. And I thought about that and I was like, when you meet that person, it's like you were super in love and this tragic accident ended your life and they had to move on. They were forced to move on.
yeah,
Um, and they've had kids now, they can't ever be with you.
yeah,
And it's kind of like, I often think that the curse of reincarnation, if you could remember it, because you might be stuck on your past lives and you wouldn't be able to move on because you'd be stuck on all the good memories that you had before and the good connections that you had before. So it's
yeah.
like you having your memories erased would be a necessity because otherwise it would be an absolute curse to remember, you know,
Because
all
you
the
will still
regrets and
be
tragedies
remembered.
of your lives gone past, right? Because like if you think about it, like and I also thought about that even in our own lives. Like the worst thing in life, I think, is to have regrets. Like that really destroys people. You know, like people think, oh, should I have been with this person? Should I have taken this job? Should I have done this stuff? That's why, like, I don't know, but whatever the outcome, I would rather do the thing that feels right than make the smarter decision.
I agree. I agree. I agree.
Right. So
No, I'm like, no, I'm like, you know how like if this was a real conversation, if there was like a plant behind you, I would be staring right now to take a breather because it's like heavy, 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 you know?
yeah, yeah, there's a lot of stuff. Sorry for like getting so
Oh
in depth
no,
about
don't
that.
apologize. No, we're always like this on our
Okay, cool, cool.
conversations. But no, Taryn, like, thank you so much. And where can we find you?
Oh, I think on YouTube would be best.
Yeah.
YouTube.com/C/Odd Compass. But just, yeah, you can search up Odd Compass on YouTube and you'll find my channel. Or you can check out Odd Compass History on Instagram. But
Yeah.
yeah, if you like South and Southeast Asian history, then that's a fun channel that I operate. So check it out.
Thank you so much. And I wish you have a beautiful full day.
Thank you. You
Full
too.
today.
Thanks.
Yeah. And we'll see each other again.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.